Les Gold put everything at risk and almost lost everything. While it may have seemed easy, things weren't as simple as they seemed behind the scenes at the King of Pawn Shop in Detroit. Employee betrayals, money problems, and a deal that was so shocking that it was covered all over the world. His story didn't end when Hardcore Pawn stopped airing. What really happened next is very different from what fans thought would happen. What happened to Les Gold after all these years? Les Gold built Hardcore Pawn on chaos, big people, and even bigger deals. But no one thought the real trouble would start in his own shop. American Jewelry and Loan was more than just a TV. It was a business, a family business, and a place where money, people, and fights were at stake. The business was run smoothly by Les, his son Seth, and his daughter Ashley. They had to deal with crazy people, crazy talks, and even fights every once in a while. The worst deception, though, it came from their own workers, who they trusted the most. You'd think that people who work in a pawn shop that is shown on national TV would be more careful, right? There are security cams all over. The Gold family was following them around. Millions of people are watching. Not really, though. Some workers got too cozy. In one of them, the last person Les Gold thought he would see. We need to go back to one of the biggest crimes in Hardcore Pawn's history, when a valued worker was caught stealing. Not just any worker, but Joe, who was in charge of security at the shop. Yes, you did hear that right. The person who was supposed to keep the store safe was the one who stole from it. He wasn't just taking a few cheap things here and there. Jewelry worth tens of thousands of dollars has been stolen. Les thought it was a bad idea. It didn't make sense. He set a trap by leaving a valuable diamond ring in a certain place, with just enough to hide it that it looked like no one had seen it. The ring wasn't there the next morning. Les isn't the type to freak out. He had a feeling that something was wrong, but he needed proof. So he did what any pawn shop owner would do. He looked at the home video. That's when he saw it. Joe stole gold even though he trusted him with his business, his workers, and his family. Not just once or twice, but over several days. Let's be honest. Les might have lost it at that point. This person had been with him for more than 3 years. A person who was like family, but he didn't lose it. Instead, he was smart. He called the police. Joe stayed in the shop because of him. Also, he pretended like everything was fine. That could have been the hardest part. It would be weird to talk to someone who just stole from you while acting like nothing was wrong. That's what Les needed to do, is because Joe would run away if he got worried. Les wasn't going to let that happen. Joe went into the shop like he did every other day, not knowing what was there for him. Les was already setting the trap at the same time. When the police arrived, the security footage was already loaded, and Joe knew right away when he was called to the back, he was done. But now comes the crazy part. When asked, Joe revealed that he had stolen. Not a single lie or excuse, he just told the truth. Then things got really crazy. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a bunch of stolen jewelry. More than $77,000 worth of goods. Let's take a moment to talk about $77,000. You're not just putting a few rings in your pocket. That's a big steal. He had been doing it for a long time. The police moved right away. Joe was caught right away. One of Les Gold's most valued workers was gone in an instant. But American Jewelry and Loan had had an inside job before. A much bigger problem was shown by the show workers were taking from Les right in front of him. It wasn't just Joe, there were more. It felt like a punch in the gut every time. Ashley and Seth were very angry. They began to question everyone. Was there something bigger going on behind the scenes? How long had this been going on? Now could we trust anyone? It wasn't easy for me to work at American Jewelry and Loan. Even though the Golds were very careful, people still found ways to get ahead. Some workers got too used to their jobs. Some people thought they could trick the system, but since there were cameras on every wall, they would be caught soon. Things get even stranger from here. This wasn't something from TV. This happened in real life. Bobby J., who used to work at Hardcore Pawn, later said in an interview that everything people saw was real. There was no lying about it, no planned drama. These thefts, they really did happen. Bobby said that the shop changed after Joe was caught. It didn't feel right. There was a lot of tension. All of a sudden, every worker felt like they were being watched closely. And to be honest, they were. Take a look. Les Gold had goods worth millions of dollars in that shop. Things like gold, gems, watches, and high-end tech could be taken away in an instant if the wrong person became too greedy. The Golds had seen everything. There were con artists trying to rip people off, angry people over low deals, and even fake police officers trying to rob the store. But what if the threat came from their own employees? That hit in a different way. But here's the thing, this wasn't the only problem that Hardcore Pawn had. Something even bigger was going on at the same time as all of this. Something that would make the shop, the show, and Les Gold's fame go through the roof. There are many years before Hardcore Pawn that we need to look back at in order to understand how Les Gold became the brave businessman that millions of people saw on the show. American Jewelry and Loan didn't just appear out of thin air. It wasn't just a matter of luck or one smart purchase. Years of hard work in a field where one bad deal could cost you thousands of dollars and where putting your trust in the wrong person could cause you to lose everything. Les learned those lessons early on, and one of them almost killed him. Les worked in his grandfather's pawn shop in 1971, long before he was a TV star. One normal day turned deadly. Around noon on December 31st, a thief with a gun broke into the store. There has always been a lot of risk in pawn shops, especially in big towns like Detroit. Cash, jewelry, gold, and high-end goods are what they deal in. Exactly the kind of goods that thieves want. Les had seen danger before, but this time things got worse in a way that would stay with him forever. As the robbery went on, shooting broke out inside the store. A police officer who went to the scene of the crime was shot and killed. The death of another man that day turned what should have been a normal afternoon into a tragedy that Les will never forget. He was there. He saw it take place. After that, he knew that nothing in life was certain, even though he wasn't hurt physically. Everything could be taken away in an instant. A lot of people who go through something like that never fully get better. They are scared all the time. They stay away from anything that might be risky. Les did the wrong thing. He made a choice instead of letting it break him. He was never going to give up. Don't let fear run his life. Don't let anyone use him or his business for their own gain. He changed how he dealt with people, deals, and even his own workers after that. This is why Les ran his shop with an iron fist when Hardcore Pawn became very famous years later. This business was more than just a pawn shop. It was such a big business that it did more deals in one day than some banks. Over 1,000 people came through those doors every day. Between 600 and 800 new loans were made, and another 300 to 400 people came in to get their things back. There is no room for weakness when you have that much to deal with. There is no time to think again. That way of thinking showed up in his personal beliefs. You had to earn their trust. It could not be fixed after it was broken. This is why it hurt so much when betrayal didn't come from the outside after all he had done and after living through one of the scariest times of his life. It wasn't a hidden thief or a mad customer. It was from someone he trusted, someone he had faith in, someone who worked behind his store's counter. Les had always thought that people should be given another chance. He knew things were hard sometimes and that not everyone had a perfect record. That's why over the years he'd hire back workers who had quit under strange circumstances. Some were having personal problems. Some people had made bad choices. Les did give them another chance if he thought it was worth the risk. In this case, Amy and Rich were workers whose return to American Jewelry and Loan had already caused problems behind the scenes. Amy had worked at the shop before, but the way she quit made Les doubt her loyalty. She didn't just quit, she ran away. No notice, no reason, nothing. She was there one day and not there the next. Most of the time Les would have been done with her. But her uncle, who had worked for Les for years and been a loyal customer, asked him to give her another chance. He agreed even though he knew it wasn't a good idea. Seth, who was always the more cautious of the two, strongly disagreed with the choice. He said that someone who had already left could easily do it again. Rich, on the other hand, had worked for the business for a long time. He had been trained by Les, and at one point he had full faith in his skills. Things changed over time, though. Rich began making choices that were not clear-cut, and Les noticed a pattern of behavior that made him feel uncomfortable. He kept him on, though, because he thought that training and experience would pay off in the end. What Les didn't know at the time was that these second chances and decisions were going to go wrong in ways he didn't expect. Some employees who used to be loyal began to cut corners and make bad choices that put the shop at risk. In some cases, they did things that made Les question everything he had worked for. The worst part, though, it wasn't just bad management or workers not doing their jobs. It was about more than that, something more dangerous. Les Gold had made American Jewelry and Loan one of the best pawn shops in the country over many years. There was more to it than just buying and selling. It was about getting through. He had seen the business change, risen to every challenge, and grown a single shop into a chain with multiple locations that served over 1,000 people every day. He was already a star in the pawn game by the time Hardcore Pawn aired in 2010. But fame brought a whole new level of tensions were rising behind the scenes because of the scrutiny. It wasn't just for TV when Les, Seth, and Ashley fought. In the family there was a real power fight going on. Seth was driven and always looking for ways to bring the business up to date. He would sometimes make deals without telling his dad about them if he thought it was the right thing to do. Ashley, on the other hand, wasn't as involved in running the shop every day. But when she was, she didn't think twice about challenging her dad and brother. The fights were real. Seth and Ashley really did want to beat Ashley, and there were times when it looked like the whole family was about to break up. Les never lost control, though. He had been through too much to let family problems or betrayals at work get to him. He had lived through an armed theft and seen people lose everything in an instant. He knew that the only way to win in this business was to keep going. He didn't slow down after Hardcore Pawn did not air in 2015. American Jewelry and Loan was still doing well, and Les and Seth were still running the business together. Even though the show was over, the work wasn't. Les Gold stayed a big name in the loan business while other reality TV stars went out of style. In the business world, he was still very involved, but not as much on social media as his son. Seth took over most of the public-facing tasks. He regularly posted updates, broke down famous scenes from the show on TikTok, and sometimes invited Les to give his opinion. At this point, Les had made a huge fortune. He owned several businesses, had hundreds of workers, and had millions of dollars worth of goods in stock. It was thought that he was worth about $3.5 million, which is proof of decades of hard work and smart business choices. But even though he was doing well, stories began to spread. It had been going on for years that strange online stories said Les Gold. People on social media believed these fake death scams, which made fans wonder if their favorite TV pawn dealer was really dead. All of the time, the reports turned out to be false. Les was still living and well, and he was still running the business that made him great. As time went on, though, the pawn shop began to show something much scarier. The goal wasn't just to sell special things, settle heated arguments, or keep workers in line. It was about getting through. Survival for real. In the past few years, American Jewelry and Loan has seen a clear change in the kinds of people who come in. People who wanted to buy, sell, or get cash quickly had always come to the shop, but Les started to notice a pattern. It was getting harder and harder for people to come in and make money. They didn't sell rare coins, trinkets, or expensive jewelry to make extra cash. They had to pawn everyday things to make ends meet. Pawn shops used to be the last option for people who needed cash quickly for an emergency, a sudden car repair, or a medical bill. Les says that's no longer the case, though. People who come to him don't care about next month or even next week. Their main goal is to get through the day. Many people come in a desperate state and sell their tool, engagement rings, and other things that are important to them. Pawn shops are what Les calls street-level economists, and he's right. When people are having trouble with money, pawn shops see the effects long before the big banks do. Right now, what he sees doesn't make things look good.
The change is huge at his store on 8 Mile in Detroit. It's now twice as long for people to ask for loans as it was for people to get their things back. This tells Les exactly what's going on. People can't pay to get their things back. They are pawning their valuables to get by for now, but they can't pay to get them back when the time comes. It's not just Detroit either. The loan shops Les has talked to across the country all agree on this. People are bringing in technology, tools, and even clothes that wouldn't have been allowed to be pawned 10 years ago. On the surface, the economy may look steady, but for millions of Americans, things are much worse. It's not just buyers who are affected by this change. Business itself is too. Pawn shops have traditionally found a balance between lending money and selling items. There is an unbalance though because more people are pawning and fewer are buying. More things than ever are being held by stores like American Jewelry and loan for customers who aren't coming in. The market for used cars has slowed down. Loans are still a steady way to make money, but they also come with some risks. Even so, Les keeps doing what he's always done. He adapts. He has lived through economic downturns before, but this one seems different. There's more to it than just a slump or rising prices. The way people live their lives is about to change in a big way. For short-term needs, they aren't going to junk shops anymore. They are clinging to them for dear life. The stories that tell everyone why hardcore pawn was so popular in the first place are also very important. These are the strange, surprising, and sometimes incredible things that come through the door. Les has seen a lot of different things over the years, from old objects to fancy sports cars, but one of the most shocking. This van used to belong to Dr. Jack Kevorkian, who was known as Dr. Death because of his controversial work with assisted suicide cases. Les knew this wasn't a normal. When someone came into American Jewelry and loan with his car, after a lot of haggling, Les was able to buy it for $20,000. The seller had originally asked for $40,000. Was it worth it? Probably not in terms of how much it could be sold, but for Les it was worth it to own a piece of history no matter how dark it was. Les spent time giving back in addition to his business work, but he also had a soft side. He was known for being tough when he was bargaining. He did a lot of work for the Heat and Warmth Fund, a charity in Detroit that helps low-income families pay their heating bills. He made tens of thousands of dollars for charity over the years by using his fame to make a real difference in his community. Les was still a big deal in the loan business even though he wasn't on TV anymore. He wrote a book called For What It's Worth: Business Wisdom from a Pawnbroker. It was a New York Times bestseller in 2013 and gave people a look into the business world from the point of view of someone who had spent his whole life learning about it. Les Gold is still the same person he has always been, a businessman, a fighter, and a winner. American Jewelry and Loan is still open for business, and Les is still the main person behind it. Hardcore Pawn is no longer on TV. He doesn't like to stay busy, quit, or slow down. The market has changed, the business world has changed, and customers' wants have changed. But at the end of the day, running a pawn shop is still all about getting to know people, making deals, and always being one step ahead. The easy answer to the question what happened to Les is that he's still doing what he does best. Les Gold will stay in business as long as there are people who need help, deals that need to be made, and American Jewelry.